So these are the new Oakley Meta Vanguards, and this could be one of the most surprising pieces of sports tech I've reviewed in quite some time, where these take all the features from their Oakley Meta housetones and make some sports-focused upgrades like a wraparound design with more security, there's louder speakers, there's increased water resistance, a wider field of view with a centered camera, as well as Garmin and Strava integration. So AI glasses have definitely gained a lot of popularity recently, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they've been able to make these look like normal glasses for the most part. I think based on the popularity of their Meta Ray-Bans and Meta housetones, they've decided to bring that technology to a more sports-focused model with the Vanguards. And while I haven't necessarily been interested in these for the AI features, I've been incredibly interested in these for the cameras, not only for capturing footage for my social, but also this channel where I review all sorts of sports tech like watches and bike computers. But adding to that, these also have integration with Garmin devices where you can hear real-time stats and can automatically record clips during your activity and then merge that all together and overlay your data onto your footage after you're done. So with all these sports-focused features, are these going to be the next big thing in sports tech? Well, we're definitely going to talk about that in this video, where we'll be covering every aspect of these new Vanguards, like the fit, how the speakers sound, the camera quality, how well they work for different kinds of sports like running, road biking, gravel biking, as well as mountain biking. And then we'll also go over the details of the Garmin and Strava integration. And I'm also going to talk about what happens if you don't have a Garmin device and what features that you can actually still use with these. And for one more bonus, I'll also have details for all you existing Meta Ray-Ban and Meta houston owners out there, because some of these features are actually going to be coming to your glasses. And if you do find the information in this video to be useful, do me a favor and just hit that like button down below. It's a small thing that you can do that'll help this video and the channel out quite a bit, and I appreciate it. And by the way, for all the clips I'll be showing you in this video, I'm not going to be doing any color correction or anything like that. These are going to be straight from the app. So the Vanguards take inspiration from their Oakley Sphera sunglasses, where these have a wraparound design which helps block out sun and wind, and these come in 4 different frame and lens combinations with a couple of black framed options as well as a couple of white framed options. And the ones I have for you today are the black frames with the Rode Prism lenses. And the lenses are all interchangeable, so they'll also be offering replacement lenses in all the colors, as well as a new low light option that'll be coming in the future. And all the replacement lenses are going to run $85. One thing to note about the lenses on the Vanguards is that there's no prescription option available, at least at the moment, but you can put prescription lenses into the housetones as well as the Ray-Bans. And then for fit and security, so I have a pretty large head, so I've had challenges finding glasses that not only fit for size, but also the look. But I was kind of surprised at how well these fit my head. These don't have much flex to them though, so they're not like regular sunglasses where there's some leeway in terms of conforming to your head, but these fit me pretty darn well. And these also come with 3 different size nose pads depending on a high bridge or low bridge fit. So for the actual security during sports, so 0 issues while running, road biking, and even mountain biking, where the snug fit as well as the grippy nose pad did a really good job. I was thinking that the additional weight of these may make them move down on my face a little bit more on rougher terrain while mountain biking, but they stayed on pretty darn well. And speaking of which, so for weight, so these weigh 67 grams versus the 51 grams of the housetones, at least on my scale. And while they're definitely heavier than a standard set of sunglasses, I didn't have any issues there where I didn't have any head fatigue or anything like that. And like I mentioned before, they didn't slip down on my face either. For battery life, so these are rated to get up to 9 hours of use and then an additional 36 hours with the case, which has a built-in battery. If you're listening to music, so that's going to drop it down to around 6 hours. Now, those are up to numbers, which is what we usually see for battery life, but for some real world tests, so when I was listening to music without recording any video, it was using around 11% per hour, which funny enough was above their claims. And then when I was using auto capture without listening to music, it was using around 15% per hour. But when I was using auto capture as well as listening to music at the same time, it was using anywhere from 20 to 30% per hour, depending on how much footage I was recording. So battery life will definitely depend on how much footage that you're planning to capture, but the nice thing is that these do have a quick charge feature where the glasses can charge up to 50% by placing them in the case for 20 minutes. Now, one thing to note here is that moisture and charging aren't best friends, so make sure your Vanguards are nice and dry and not wet with sweat before putting them back in the case. And then for storage, so these have 32 gigabytes of storage for your photos and videos. And by the way, you don't need to have your phone with you to manually take photos and videos with both the buttons, as well as even asking Meta, "Hey Meta, record a video." "Hey Meta, stop recording." You can actually ask Meta to take photos or video without your phone with you. However, you will need phone connectivity for some of the other smart AI features, as well as some of the other features that we'll talk about here in just one bit. These also have louder speakers than the housetones, where these are supposed to be 6 decibels louder, and that was immediately noticeable, where I'd have to have my housetones around 60 to 70% or so on the volume slider on my iPhone, versus these where I only need to have these around 50% for the equivalent volume. Funny enough though, I didn't have any problems with my housetones, even at speeds of around like 20 miles per hour or so. Totally fine with that. But these just can get very loud if you're going even faster than that or experiencing more wind. But when it comes to the actual sound quality, so this again was something that took me by surprise, where for an an open ear design, I'm pretty impressed here, and they're surprisingly good considering how little room they actually have to put speakers in here, where they have a good amount of range where there's really good mids and nice clear highs. Now, being an open ear design, there's really only so much bass that you can get out of something like these, so there's not really going to be any like thump by any means, but there's still enough on the low end which provides an overall full sound, and these aren't tinny at all, which I've definitely experienced with some other glasses out there. And then when it comes to the microphone quality, so the Vanguards have 5 microphones, so this is kind of like a baseline test right now, just to kind of test out like what it sounds like outside. There's a little bit of a breeze right now, but yeah, this is what the mics sound like now. So here's a higher speed wind test of the Oakley Meta Houston, so going around 21 miles an hour right now. I do have a tailwind though. Okay, so now headed back into headwind, which is always fun, but going around 15, 16 miles an hour, but stiff headwind. So what I found is that you can totally just speak normally with these and you don't need to raise your voice to overcome wind, because when I did in that last clip, it started to clip the audio. And another thing I noticed is that it's really good at picking up first person audio, but it isn't necessarily good at picking up people around you. So what do you think, super flag now?
I'm good, thanks.
You good? Okay.
Maybe.
One thing I did experience though at higher speeds was that asking Meta for different things was kind of hit and miss at speeds over 15 to 20 miles an hour when I was speaking at a normal volume. So I found that I had to like raise my voice quite a bit higher at speeds to ask Meta for something. When it comes to the smart features and the everyday AI features, so these have all the same features as all the other Meta glasses, where you can control the music playback on your phone. You can also connect different music streaming services apps, which give you more control, like asking Meta to play a specific playlist. And then for calls, you can speak through the microphone and hear on the speakers. You can also connect Meta apps like WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger, where you can also send text and photos. And then you can also ask Meta to identify different things that you may be looking at. Now, although I'm not necessarily interested in these for the everyday AI aspects, I actually did find some uses for sports. So for instance, hey Meta, is it windy outside right now?
It's currently a fresh breeze, 21 miles per hour from the west-northwest.
A fresh breeze of 21 miles an hour. I'd call that a bit more than fresh. Now, moving on to some of the more sports-specific features. So these have an IP67 water resistance rating, which is up from the IPX4 on the Houston. So these should be able to handle even getting caught in like a heavy downpour, along with like a really sweaty workout. And for the controls, so these are slightly different than the Houstons, where they move the capture button down to the underside of the temple versus on top like their other glasses. And this makes a lot of sense considering that these may be used with hats and helmets. Along with that, they also have a customizable action button right next to the capture button, where you can assign this to do different things like Meta AI features, accessibility controls, hearing real-time stats, as well as alternative capture modes. And then these also do have touch controls on the right-hand arm, where you can play and pause music, skip tracks, as well as adjust the volume. And then lastly, the power button is now an actual button versus the toggle switch that's found on the Houstons. So for the camera, so this has a 12 megapixel sensor where you can shoot photos as well as up to 3K vertical video. And this also has slow motion capture modes with 1080p at 60 frames per second, as well as 720p at 120 frames per second. And for the modes themselves, so if you're recording in 3K at 30 frames per second, so you can record up to 3-minute clips. There's also 1080p at 60 frames per second, again at up to 3-minute clips, and then 1080p with 30 frames per second, where you can record up to 5-minute clips. The 120 frames per second 720p slow motion mode isn't actually listed in here, as they separate that out as a dedicated mode where you can trigger that by even asking Meta to record slow motion video or assigning that to the action button. But with the slow-mo mode, that can record up to 1 minute of real-time recording, which will then translate to a 4-minute long clip. Stabilization options are also different between the modes, where with 1080p recording at 30 frames per second, you can choose between low, medium, and high, but with stabilization is actually set to medium for 1080p 60 frames per second, as well as 3K 30 frames per second. But for the difference between these modes, so for cycling, it was buttery smooth in any of the modes, but for running, it will have a little bit of up and down movement still, so it's not necessarily completely eliminated by any means, but it's still very usable clips. The biggest difference I really saw was with horizontal stabilization, where with high and medium, that basically eliminated that altogether, but with low, you'll actually see a lot more of that side-to-side movement. But being that most of us probably want the highest quality footage possible, I found the medium stabilization level to work great for almost everything in the 3K mode. The Vanguards also come with a wider field of view, where this has a 122-degree field of view versus the 100-degree field of view on the Houstons, and I think this can make a difference depending on what you do. Probably especially so with cycling, where you can get more of your hands and your handlebars into the frame, which can basically add context to your shot. Another difference between these and the Houstons is that these have a centered camera, and for cycling footage, footage, this was an important feature for me. So with the Houstons, since the camera is on the left-hand side, footage looks offset. And what I learned I had to do while using those while cycling was kind of like shift my head to the side to the right, so it'll have a little bit more centered image. With these, that totally eliminates that. And I think that's actually one of the huge features with these versus the Houstons when it comes to sports. And then for image quality, so these definitely have a lot of dynamic range to these, where like these shots at sunset, it handled the shadows well, as well as the direct sun too, where it did a good job of boosting the shadows without looking artificial. And it also didn't do a bad job with the sun shining directly into the lens. And then when it comes to detail, so if we look at these images sized to a 4K timeline, which is what this video is going to be produced at, they look really awesome, where it produces a ton of detail. But if we do look at these at native resolution, here's where you can see the limitations of a 12 megapixel sensor. Now, when it comes to low light performance, well, these are sunglasses, so I'm not really sure how much we'll be using these at night. However, we may be using these at sunrise or sunset. And that's where I did notice some artifacts in some of these clips where it did have to pump up the ISO a bit. But interestingly, it was really only on a few clips where I noticed those artifacts. On a lot of the other clips at sunset, they look fantastic. But being that these are primarily intended to be used for social, the detail is totally fine for that. But if you want something more print-worthy to hang on your wall, well, that's where your phone or a real camera will be better. And then there's also a slow motion capture mode where it can record 120 frames per second at 720p. And it's not necessarily the highest resolution by any means, but the quality of the slow-mo was actually pretty good for the most part. And then there's also a hyperlapse feature where it can record at intervals over a longer period of time and then stitch that together if you want to record a longer time lapse of your activity. But it's a bit of a bonus for all you second-gen Meta and Houston owners. The slow motion capture modes, the 60 frames per second, as well as the hyperlapse features will start rolling out as an update for your glasses starting today. The only thing that's going to be different are the wider field of view as well as the centered camera, since those are hardware-related features. But the rollout is going to be gradual though, so it may be a few weeks before everyone gets the update. Now, one of the highlight features is that there's also integration with compatible Garmin devices with the Meta AI app, where you can hear your real-time stats during your activity. There's also an auto capture mode where it can automatically record clips at different intervals, and it can also utilize the built-in LED to let you know if you're out of range with certain workout targets like heart rate or pace. So with the auto capture feature, so here's where it can automatically take videos throughout your ride, run, or hike. And what happens here is that when you go to start an activity on your compatible Garmin, you'll hear an auto capture started message read out to you, along with how it's actually going to auto capture footage during your activity.
Starting auto capture. I'll capture every half mile of your hike and also other moments based on Garmin stats like speed, heart rate, and total ascent. I'll capture moments from your bike ride based on Garmin stats. I'll capture every mile of your run and also other moments based on Garmin stats like speed, heart rate, and total ascent. Take your own captures along the way too.
And then when you're done with your activity and click save on your Garmin, you should hear an auto capture ended message on your Vanguards. And then when you sync your Vanguards with the Meta AI app, all that footage will be saved in a folder or library for that particular activity. And then from there, it's also going to automatically create a little highlight reel for you of your activity with stats collected on your Garmin device. Now, in addition to the clips automatically recorded at every split or interval, it also records clips at other key moments during your activity. However, I'm not exactly sure what criteria is using for these key moments because they seemed a little bit random. So I'd really like to see some options for customization with this auto capture feature where we could define when to record clips, like let's say every minute, every 5 minutes, every half mile, or even if we hit like a certain heart rate or something like that. Additionally, on the auto-generated compilation, it has the device name kind of plastered right there in the center. So I'd also like to see the option to show that or hide it. You can still manually take photos or video if you like during your activity, so you're not just limited to the auto-captured clips, but with any of the footage recorded during your activity, you do have the option of overlaying stats onto any of that footage, which you can then share to socials. And then with the real-time stats, so here's where we can ask Meta for certain workout stats like your heart rate. Hey Meta, what's my heart rate?
Your heart rate is 80 beats per minute.
Hey Meta, what's my average power?
Your average power is 0 watts.
Hey Meta, what's been my average speed?
Your speed is 0 right now, but your average speed till now is 0 miles per hour.
Hey Meta, what's my total ascent?
You've climbed 0 feet.
Hey Meta, what's my total descent?
You've descended 0 feet.
Hey Meta, what's been my average heart rate over the last 2 minutes?
Your average heart rate the last 2 minutes was 79 beats per minute.
Hey Meta, what's been my average heart rate for the last minute?
Your average heart rate the last 1 minute was 77 beats per minute.
Now, we can, of course, just look at our watch or our bike computer for particular stats, but with watches, I could definitely see some scenarios where we don't necessarily want to take our hands off the handlebars to see those stats. But another use case for these could be some stats that we don't necessarily have on our data fields on our devices. And there's also an LED indicator on the inside of the glasses, which can let you know if you're outside of your zone by turning red instead of the standard white. So this is where if you're doing a workout, if you fall outside of, let's say, a target heart rate or target power, it'll turn red.
Heart rate low.
Now, when it comes to the real-time stats, the auto capture mode, as well as the LED indicator, these do require your phone to be with you, because what happens is that your watch talks to Garmin Connect then talks to the Meta AI app, and then the Meta AI app talks to your glasses. So for instance, if I go ahead and turn off Bluetooth on my phone, when I start an activity on my watch, it doesn't say auto capture started. And then if I ask Meta to read out my stats, nothing happens there either. And it says it needs a Bluetooth connection to my phone. Hey Meta, what's my heart rate?
To continue, make sure Bluetooth is connected.
Interestingly though, although it needs that Bluetooth connection to my phone, it doesn't necessarily need a data connection. So if I turn my Bluetooth back on, but then turn off both cellular as well as Wi-Fi, both the auto capture works as well as asking for stats.
Starting auto capture. I'll capture moments from your bike ride based on Garmin stats.
Hey Meta, what's my average heart rate over the last minute?
Your average heart rate the last 1 minute was 82 beats per minute.
However, asking Meta for more like general AI stuff doesn't necessarily work at that point, but it still can grab your stats if there's no cell or data connection. And with the real-time stats, so these are all about asking Meta for your stats, which will then be read out to you. There's no heads-up display on these, which leads us, I think, to the most common comment I got on my unboxing and first impressions video is that these don't have a heads-up display. But I think there's some practical reasons why these don't have a heads-up display, like they're Meta displays. And the first thing is size and weight, where the Meta displays aren't exactly small glasses where the frames are thicker than the standard Meta Ray-Bans, but they're also heavier at around 17 to 18 grams more. And then there's also the other component of the wristband, but I'm not necessarily sure that's needed, so maybe that's a moot point. Anyhow, putting a heads-up display in here would make these larger and heavier, and being that these are intended to be used for sports, well, I'm not necessarily sure how usable they'd be at that point. These are certainly heavier than normal sunglasses as well as even the Meta Houstons, but I found them to be perfectly fine. However, adding 17 to 18 grams with these, I think would kind of like tip them over that edge. The other thing about a heads-up display, and this is more of a personal thing probably, is that as a cyclist, I definitely do not want anything interfering with my vision, and I also could get distracted by some data on a display in front of me. I'd prefer to just get data on demand, whether that's asking Meta for my stats or just looking at my bike computer or my watch. Now, even though you need to have your phone with you for the integration pieces like the real-time stats as well as the auto capture feature, you can actually pair the Vanguards directly to your Garmin watch or another device as a pair of Bluetooth headphones, so you can actually still listen to music without your phone with you. All right, so welcome back to another episode of the FitFoul podcast, where we talk about anything and everything sports and health tech related. And then for the Strava integration, so what happens here is that when you have an activity saved in Strava, you'll be able to overlay stats from the activity onto any clips that you took during your activity. So here's you can choose from the stats that were collected, even on indoor activities, which is kind of interesting considering these are sunglasses. But here's a little bonus for you. So this isn't just for activities recorded with the Strava app itself. What I found is that with recording a workout with another device that already syncs to Strava, you can merge that data as well. So this is where you can still overlay stats from, let's say, your Apple Watch or another sports watch as well. However, though, when it comes to the real-time stats, the LED target indicator as well as the auto capture feature, those are going to be Garmin only features. But for one final bonus here is that the Garmin and Strava integration pieces are actually coming to all of you out there with Meta Ray-Bans as well as Meta Houstons with that software update that should be landing today. So with the Meta Houstons, I found myself liking them, but not necessarily loving them. But with these, I think these are simply awesome, and I think it really comes down to those sports-focused features. The AI bits are certainly interesting, but for how I want to use these, the Vanguards address nearly all the things that held me back from using the Houstons as much as I would like to, like the better water resistance, the wider field of view, and the centered camera. But when it comes to the real-time stats, so I'm not necessarily sure how much I'll be using that feature. However, the auto capture feature, totally different story, where that's just going to provide an easy way for me to have footage without me having to think about it. However, I would like to have some more control over what other key moments are saved during my activity. But I think these really are meant for sharing on social, and the quality of the content these can capture for those platforms is fantastic. But if you are looking at these for longer form recording for, let's say, replacing an action camera, that's probably not what these are meant for. I think what's really made these awesome for me is that these are an all-in-one solution with high quality sunglasses, fantastic headphones, as well as an incredibly convenient way of capturing footage. But that does bring us to the biggest limitation of these, is that they only shoot vertical video and don't shoot horizontal. And honestly, that's a pretty big bummer, but if they did shoot horizontal, man, these would just be absolutely amazing. But overall, these really took me by surprise, where I went into these with a good amount of skepticism, but I see myself using these a lot. Not a perfect product by any means, which the same can be said for plenty of other things out there, but these are probably one of my new favorite pieces of sports tech that I've tried in quite some time. Anyhow, if you found the information in this video to be useful, do me a favor and just quickly hit that like button down below, and also be on the lookout for plenty more sports tech videos that are coming soon. And I may even have like a comparison video of the Houstons versus the Vanguards that'll be coming out as well. In the meantime, have fun out there, and we will see you in the next video.